everyone to another episode of the Alignment Podcast. Today, I must tell you, I am just honored to bring you someone who I cannot even say, I don't even think he understands how much of an impact he's had on my life. Pivotal turning point when I needed something to change and become more disciplined. I found his work in the back of a book, Integration Marketing. He had executed so well, and it changed my life for the better. So my guest today is the founder of 30 plus startups and now serves as the founder of and CEO of Simpleology, something I use daily. It's a great web app that doubles your free time and cuts your workload in half by simplifying your life. We'll put a link in the details. Mark is often referred to as the father of digital marketing for his pioneering role in the early days of online marketing. Among other things, he started the first ebook publishing company, the first online ad tracking company, the second PPC search engine while the Google boys were still in college, invented the tracking pixel, and so on. One of Mark's websites, Starblaze, shot up to number 36 globally within 6 weeks of launching on a $0 ad budget. Mark's the author of over a dozen books in print in 25 languages, 4 of which were #1 bestsellers, several of which are used as marketing textbooks in universities around the world. He's a former U.S. Army officer and a Cold War veteran of military intelligence, and he has been awarded for his military service by the NSA, the Defense Language Institute, the U.S. Army, the Republic of Korea Army, the Korean Consulate General, and the President of the United States. Now, on a personal note, Mark is now a health and fitness buff with 8% body fat. Let's go! Who was once 60 pounds overweight. Talk about transformation. And he trains in MMA, gymnastics, and calisthenics. He ran his first half marathon at age 40 through the streets of Manhattan barefoot. That was last year, right? Man, give it up.
Yeah, I wish it
for
was last
Mr.
year.
Mark Joyner, right?
Thank you, man.
It was a little longer than that. Can't believe
while
you're
ago.
over 41, bro.
It's been a minute. Well, yeah, I'm 56 now, actually.
Congrats. You're looking great, man.
Thank you. Likewise.
Great. So we go back a ways, and I'm so grateful to have read the book, The Passion Test, Janet Atwood and Chris someone.
Oh, yeah.
Way back, and I stumbled upon this little blurb at the end for your work, and it led me to Simpleology, and bro, changed so much for me. I was the guy losing stuff all the time, just disoriented and didn't have great structure, and you just taught me a way that ever since then I've been using over 20 years, man. Simpleology, awesome. Black belt, y'all. So
yeah, right
thanks
on.
to Mark. So I want to ask you the first question I ask all the guests. This show is all about alignment. It's called the Alignment Podcast. For me, alignment is about, the way I hear it, is to align with the source of life, expand awareness, and be able to choose from higher levels of consciousness how we move forward, be able to ask questions and even access other types of information and modalities of thinking and all of that, right? So that's, to me, kind of in a nutshell of alignment. What I want to know is, what is alignment to you?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to just say thank you. I'm honored to be here with you too, man. And I remember the first time we met, you were like this, source of immense light in the room while I was interviewing some dude. And I was like, man, who is that dude over there? I think I'm going to become friends with this guy. And you handed me this CD and you were just all, humble about it. And anyway, this is a long time ago. For most of y'all probably don't know what CDs are. These are these things that we use to listen to music once upon a time. And I popped it in when I got home from this trip. Where was it? I think it was somewhere right above New York City. I had just been traveling in New York City, and there's this song I've been hearing on the radio all the time. I was like, man, I love this song. There's like this energy from this song. And John's like, hey, this is my band, And I popped in the CD when I got home, and it just knocked me out of my chair. It was that damn song I'd been hearing in New York City all this time, Swallow Your Fears, which is still one of my all-time favorite songs. So anyway, man, I'm a big fan of you too, brother, and I'm super honored to be here, and I've just appreciated your friendship so much. And so I'll tell you about alignment for me. over time, I understood the importance of it more and more. We've baked that into kind of the essence of what Simpleology is. Even if you go back to the original days of Simpleology with like Simpleology 101, you know, the first law of Simpleology is the law of straight lines, you know,
Yes.
right? And the second law, the law of focused attention, you know, you've got to keep your attention on the thing that you want to achieve. The law of focused energy is the third law. Really, the whole thing is about alignment. And when I teach my higher level business clients now, I teach them an acronym, RRFFAA. And it started out as just RFA. Then I realized over time, as I gained some wisdom, that was not a sustainable thing that I was teaching. The original one was relentless focused action. And that's good for a while when you're like 13 years old and you got unlimited energy, you know?
Right.
But, you know, as we get older, stress kicks in. So it became relentless, relaxed, focused, fun, aligned action, right? And I, you know, maybe over time I will embellish on that a little bit and make it better.
That.
But that to me, it represents a way of moving through life that allows you to get so much done in a I don't want to say effortless way, because I think that effort is required and there's a reason for effort, and effort makes you grow. It stimulates things. But there's a balance. You know, we talk about stress in our lives, but we don't talk about how stress can actually be super powerful. You know, we have eustress, a useful stress inside of us, where, you know, if you go to the gym, stimulate the muscles in the right way, you get a certain kind of response. If you overstimulate it, that eustress can become distress. And certain types of experiences are inherently distressful, right? So alignment, just in a general sense, it does something magical inside of us. It unlocks something in us. And I think another way to look at it is, and I could riff on this probably for like 3 hours on a soliloquy and probably still have more shit to say, but like, it seems that, you know, if the universe is energy, frequency, vibration, and all of that, if you get aligned with certain frequencies, it unlocks things as well. There's something about, you know, if you're being aligned with whatever we want to call the God force, you know, and I know everybody's watching this is going to have different names for it. When we're in alignment with that, when we're in attunement with those principles, it unlocks energy inside of us. And sometimes when we're in alignment with that, we're blessed with, you know, creative gifts. Now, I think, by the way, subsequently, there are different things that one can be in alignment with, and you can get power from that. And they're not all good, right? Just as a side note. And there are a lot of people right now very much in alignment in the world with forces of darkness, if you will, whatever you want to call that. And that gives you power too. But it's a destructive kind of power. So we have to be, so not only is alignment important, what you align yourself with is extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny, man, because I'm glad you brought that up. You're hitting on a lot of beautiful topics. I want to go back first and hit on relentless, relaxed, focused, fun, aligned action. I freaking love that.
Nice.
Because I host a call called Focused Inspired Action, the fire calls, right? And I always think of it as inspired action, like, and sometimes inspired action is rest, sometimes it's joy, and sometimes it's grind it out and get it done. But in each moment, you know, it goes in those cycles. But I love that relentless, relaxed, focused, fun, aligned action, taking notes, and then getting back to the forces you just mentioned. What lessons have you encountered given the yin and yang of life, the destructive, the creative, what some would call the dark and the light? What lessons have come forward for you around that?
Man, I have observed a lot of interesting things, but I walk away from it all with a lot of uncertainty too. You know, I sort of live in a state where I'm sort of in maybe universe all the time, right? You know, when I think about things intellectually, I think about them as in terms of possibilities. So if you believe in this model of the universe, then there are certain things that will follow from that. And then there's another model of the universe that you can believe in, and certain things will follow from that. And those things are either going to line up with what you're observing and experiencing or not. And so it's something I teach folks is something I call it utilitarian model flexibility, right? And that, see, basically the idea that as a foundational operating system of your mind, as a foundational philosophy of existence, you can look at worldviews as lenses that you can take off or put on depending on the situation. And some of those lenses are going to be useful in certain contexts, and some of them are going to be super unuseful in those same contexts. So, you and I, both have different interaction with the military. I know you went to West Point for a minute. And, if you have night vision goggles, you have a great utility in using those late at night when it's dark, especially if the other guys don't have them. It's, it's super useful. But use those in the middle of the day and they're not very useful at all. When I was in the artillery corps, that was my second job in the U.S. Army. I remember reading about quantum physics and about how, quantum physics had kind of supplanted Newtonian physics. But, we're getting rounds downrange, 50 kilometers away, hitting a target very close. It's all Newton all day long, right? It didn't matter to us that quantum physics didn't necessarily apply to that. So that is the foundation, right? But at the same time, and I think it's important to start with that because, everybody's going to come at this with their different cosmology, right? They're going to come at this from, I ascribe to the Christian lens, or this flavor of the Christian lens, which may be very different from your flavor of the Christian lens, or this Hindu lens, or this, I don't know, pantheistic spiritualist lens or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that we can approach these things. And we carry a lot of that around as dogma in our minds. And then when we hear things that are outside of that, it creates conflict. For me, it's been useful to look at all of these things through the lens of useful lenses, if you will, sort of like an Uber lens. But at the same time, I'm also open to, many of the things that people say. There are some people who, have sort of a very hard interpretation of Book of Revelations, for example, and that we might be in end times right now and all of that. And there will be some final battle between good and evil, and you'd better pick sides because the consequences are going to be dire if you don't. I don't know. I don't have a firm opinion about any of those things, but I do see forces of evil in the world afoot right now. There are definitely things out there that are operating in ways that are encouraging people to do things that are not in their best interest, right? And there are some awakenings about this, but I think I question a lot of that too, because we have had awakenings in the past that have been, controlled by intelligence communities that were designed to make you think you had an awakening, but was actually part of a grander ruse to pull the wool over our eyes one more time. So right now we have this awakening going on about food and health, which I welcome. Right. In the moment while you and I are doing this, Robert F. Kennedy is going to, take part in what Trump does when he takes office in the 20th of January, which is so about 17 days from now.
Exciting times.
Exciting and interesting times. So Robert F. Kennedy's talking about all this stuff, saying, hey, there's all this, problem going on with the food and all of that. But I don't know if I trust it. There are certain things that some of these guys are saying, where, I don't know what to think about it. Right.
Yeah.
One more useful lens I'll look at it is if you look at this stuff through the Hindu lens, they've got these gods, and I might have the names wrong, but, Shiva, Shakti, Vishnu, right? These different forces of creation, destruction, and protection. And that those they believe that those dynamic forces must be at play at all times to make the universe work the way it is. So, should we look at these, things going on in the world that are like, I don't know, observably, empirically evil and wrong as something that has to be fought against? Or do we just need to accept that those forces are always going to be there, and that there needs to be, and that the secret to this is accepting that those forces are there and playing with them? I suppose the only thing I could say is, no matter what lens of the universe we use, it's never going to be a good idea, I think, to lose optimism, right? We can do the Stockdale paradox thing and look at all of that through the realism lens of like, hey, here are the hopeful things going on, here are the negative things going on. Nonetheless, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get through that situation. So anyway, again, this is another long, complicated topic. That is as simply as I can put it, my current stance on these things.
No, that's great. Oh, and there's the balance of asking questions while you're here, and then oftentimes I want to interject things, and I'm doing my best not to interject.
Please do, man.
You mentioned one thing. You mentioned about like the evil. The way I tune in and hear things, I often hear about nefarious forces, and exactly like you put about the dark, destructive, the creative, the benevolent forces, and then those that are out with real intent to harm. Like that's just a reality of what we're dealing with in consciousness. That there's not just in the physical, but there's like energies that do this, which is really interesting, or consciousness, that parts of consciousness. But for me, what you mentioned something about the different lenses, and for me, the lens that feels the best is when I tune in and I hear that it's all my consciousness. Like whether it's the dark, destructive, nefarious, what we would label as evil, whether it's the light, this, that, or it's all my consciousness. And if I can learn to accept it that way, I can let go of the judgment. I can kind of begin to navigate it in a different way. Not that I want to go around, you know what I'm saying, interjecting a lot of nefariousness in my life right now, but I do want to transcend the fear. I want to transcend the suffering. I want to transcend the, you know what I'm saying, the judgment and the separation. So I think that's like how you do that is kind of the dance for those who are on that path. And I think a lot of my listeners are on that path of like, how the heck do you do that? So I'm wondering if you have any experience around that. I've just asked for help to do it, and that's been my most successful route. I'm curious what yours has been.
Well, I would say tuning into source, whatever that source is for you, and asking for help. That's always a useful thing. It has been throughout my whole life. I've done so much meditation, and I mean, again, for people who aren't familiar with meditation, or if that's a scary word for them, think about it as prayer. I mean, you can somehow, it's quieting the mind and opening your mind up to be able to listen to whatever is there. And I've had profound experiences doing that. And for people who don't have a practice, I mean, the simplest practice is just paying attention to your breath. There's all kinds of very, very simple meditative practices out there. I mean, you can do the, repetition of a mantra, like the relaxation response did a formal scientific analysis of this stuff that we call transcendental meditation, which is just basically a repetition of a mantra, right? There's so many ways that you can meditate. I've had enormous benefit from doing that and tuning in and asking whatever that force is, solutions to problems, asking for information. And very often those answers will come, man. There's something profound going on there. Again, whatever, even if we have a very, hardcore materialistic view of the world, it is a phenomenon you can observe in yourself by doing an experiment yourself, right? And so I think that the lens that you have of saying that it's all inside you, whether it's true or not, right? I mean, maybe we are all just slices of the same universal one consciousness, and it's all consciousness, like instead of all turtles all the way down, it's all consciousness all the way down, maybe it is, right? I mean, it's possible. Whether or not that's true, whatever truth is, right? It is something that we can experience, because if we believe that we manifest our own reality to a certain degree, we will. That there's just no question about that. Even if you believe that it's the external God force running through you, or maybe you think God's part of you. I mean, whatever you think that is, I don't think it goes against anybody's religious teachings, or even against, I don't think there's even a scientific argument against it, that you can create your own reality. Now, I've heard, on the contrary, I have heard some people there are some very interesting trends going on in academia right now, and some of the things that I think are being taught to folks are a little bit dangerous. But one of the things I remember coming out very dogmatically from some of the people that I know that are deep in the university system, there's a tendency to believe that free will does not exist, right? And I thought, wow, what a mind fuck they're putting on these kids, man, to tell them authoritatively, free will does not exist, little human. Do not pretend to believe you have it. Don't have any hope for your future. You know,
Yes.
What a load of toxic bullshit that is. You know, I mean, okay, I mean, let's have a conversation about that. If that's your hypothesis, let's discuss it. But instead of having a discussion, they tell you dogmatically, free will does not exist. That's it. That's the only group of people that I've ever heard of. And I don't think that's a scientific stance. I mean, okay, it's a hypothesis that you can make that can be prosecuted like any hypothesis. But almost all people throughout history have been in tune with this idea that you have a lot of control over your own life. Now, again, as I think about it, there are contrary voices too. I remember in Korea, there were a lot of people who believed in inyan, the Korean word for fate. Fate, your fate is determined. This deterministic view of life. And it's like, there's nothing you can do to change your fate. You may as well just, strap yourself in and go along for the ride, But I think, I don't know. I think it's the exception. I think most people throughout history and most of the philosophies, be they religious, scientific, or whatever, have acknowledged that you can make decisions about things and impact the course of your future. And part of that comes from attuning your mind. And if you want to take a real, rationalist, scientific, reductionist view of it, we can, we even have scientific justification for that. The reticular activating system, shows that when we focus on things, those things tend to show up. And, you could say that, hey, those things were always there in the field because we have this field of information in which we're swimming. And we can only consciously perceive about 7 bits of those things. So, I was talking to a buddy of mine recently, a guy who was my trainer, but also sort of like my student, right? And it's this young kid, and I'm always trying to wake him up about things. And I gave him some exercises to help him notice that wow, there's so much information out there that you're not even noticing. And just by changing your awareness, just by noticing things, you can start to change your tangible experience of life. And if you start to notice that there are beautiful people out there, right? If you start to notice that there is love in the world, if you start to notice that when you treat people, even people who are doing horrible things, with kindness. Now that's not the appropriate response all the time, by the way. I'm a big firm believer in self-defense. And there are times when you got to step in and the man's got to do what the man's got to do, right? But at the same time, even after that, you can still treat that situation with some love. Okay, I got to stop this guy from doing physical harm right now. Okay, that doesn't mean I have to extract my vengeance on him. It doesn't mean I have to hold on to that anger and that hatred for a long time, because that's the poison I'm going to swallow that's not going to harm anybody, right?
Right.
So anyway, there's the complex thing, but there's the simplest notion I can pop into it.
I love it, man. So for fear of making this the longest episode I've ever done, because I will avoid doing it, because I have so many things that come to mind that I'd love to discuss with you. The things that I think are going to be most beneficial are really, one, letting listeners know, like, Mark is the guy who, if there was no Mark Joyner, there'd be no, for all you funnel hackers, there'd be no freaking Russell in his click funnels and all of that stuff. Like, literally, he talks about it. Like, Mark is the guy who inspired him and gave him the foundation to go on and build all that wonderful technology and go on and teach so many people. But I feel like the way I hear it, we all have a celestial blueprint, right? Kind of, and even astrology kind of speaks to this, and whether it's human design or whatever, all these different ways of looking at how we're created or what we're composed of. The way I hear it is celestial blueprint. A lot of people say soul's blueprint, but if you think of it as a celestial blueprint, to me, I feel like there's parts of that we have these turning points, or maybe not turning points, but call them the nexus or the hubs where we have these lessons, these things. Maybe that's designed, maybe that's pre-designed, predetermined, chosen, whatever the case is. Many of us can look in our lives and see these access points, these turning points. For you, I'm just curious if there's like, to have become who you've become, having the desires and the mission you've aligned with, we'll get to that later. What are those turning points that led you to where you are now? Or maybe 2 or 3 of them you feel like that were really important.
Yeah, let me think about that really carefully. That
you got it.
I think that we have turning points in every moment, right? Another thing from Simpleology, we talk about the inevitability of action and reaction, right? You're always acting in the moment right now, and there's always going to be a reaction to that, and you always have a choice. This moment, I have another choice. This moment, I have another choice. This moment, I have another choice. Just keeps coming over and over and over again. And in every one of those moments, you can completely change the direction of where you're going. That's most of us are not aware of that.
Yeah.
We're sort of like tuned into where we have been based on the identity that we have adopted, the experiences that we have, the beliefs that, have been pounded into us or that we have chosen over time will lock us down into a more and more narrow path. But we can change that, anytime that we want. So I would say that those nexus points can be anytime, and maybe realizing that. I don't know if there's a specific moment where I realized that, but that was probably foundational, like figuring that out and understanding that and just embracing that, and then really knowing like, hey, I can really dive into unknown waters. Now, as you get more responsibilities in life, I think that you have to be very careful about, going too radically off the path that you're on. Once people are starting to depend on you, if you've got children, if you have a business, and people are dependent upon that, you've got to be very careful. There's all sorts of radical shifts that you can make within that framework, but you want to make sure you stay on that particular path. I would say, on top of that, getting into meditation was probably a huge thing. I'm so reluctant to say this, but I would have to say that because I don't recommend this to anybody. And anyway, I think just for the sake of truth, get it out there. But I have to say, taking psychedelics was probably, transformative for me. But I want to be very, very cautious in that, because we don't know what we're doing with that stuff, man. And I think it could unlock, negative things for people too. So I don't want this to be an endorsement of that stuff.
Right. My favorite, just so you know, I don't know if you know this, but we've take people on international retreats and different things, and took group to Amazon to do ayahuasca with the shamans. Yeah. That's like one of my favorite. Those guys have passed down a beautiful culture of how to do it with intention and with this beautiful. So just so you know, I don't know if you know that about me, but
I didn't know.
I have big support around that. Yeah, I've journeyed in that realm many times. Yeah.
It would be an interesting conversation to have at some point, man. Like what your thoughts are. I like the fact that you guys are doing this in a context of, I'm sure you found some good shamans to work with, and you're probably creating a really good setting, to make all that happen. There are some substances that I'm quite curious about that I like. For example, ibogaine, I have not done, but apparently have you tried that?
No, I haven't. I've heard about it. They just talked about it recently, in fact.
If ayahuasca and those other ones are sort of like, hey, you're getting these symbolic messages that you've got to interpret and kind of unpack. Allegedly, ibogaine is sort of more like technicolor. The father is like sitting you down saying, here, son, here's where you fucked up, Yeah. Yeah. They say it like, it's like, there's nothing to interpret. You get the message. But there are people who have been addicted to heroin, allegedly, and take that stuff and get off the addiction.
That's beautiful.
And I'm all for anything that does that, man, because there's some drugs out there that have really ruined a lot of people in today's day and age.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a nexus point for me. I think getting into mixed martial arts was a really good thing for me. I had periods of physical fitness and then lacking physical fitness throughout my life. And I didn't realize, there were a lot of fears I had not faced, and getting into mixed martial arts and then demanding certain levels of performance from myself. That was a super transformative thing too. You notice most of these are personal. I could get into business transformative things, but all the business stuff stems from personal transformation. Jim Rohn used to say, I want you all to earn $1 million, not to have $1 million, but because of who you become along the way,
Yes,
Yeah.
that's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how the carrot often is there's an old analogy I remember tuning into, like, our desires are what are used to help us find our path, right? They're almost like so a lot of people think when they hear the whole be absent of desire and different things like that. The way I interpret that, like when I tune in, is be absent of the projection of desire. Projection meaning it's separate from you, like that you're lacking something, that type of desire to obtain something that you don't have is the cause of suffering, because it creates separation. Whereas desire in itself is just an indicator of something needing to be amplified that you do have, and that something is frequency and vibration. Like, we have access to all frequency and vibration. We get to choose how to amplify it, whether we project it on something that we think we don't have and go get that and give that permission to amplify it, or whether we actually cultivate and clarify that intention and amplify that frequency or frequencies, and through our imagination, visualization, whatever we got to do, whether we give ourselves permission to feel it and fully feel it, then we collapse the separation and actually have fulfillment in that bliss that desire can bring. So I bring that up to bring it full circle. Your desires often can lead you to whichever answer you choose, like the path of trying to go for something external or the path of doing something internal. Whatever you choose, that's often the thing that leads us to have these amazing experiences. For you, I want to actually focus on the weight loss thing, because you were overweight. What was the desire driving that transformation? What was the desire, that personal work that you did to overcome whatever habits, beliefs, etc. that you had? What drove that?
Well, first of all, I'm going to kind of take note of the time here, because I want to come back to what you just said and watch that. If you could send me a recording, because I really want to meditate on it, because you said something very profound there. I've thought intellectually, about, how the Buddha says, it's attachments that, cause all the suffering and all of that. But you said something about how that desire is just pointing a finger at something that's already inside you that you need to amplify. I really need to meditate on that. That's a profound notion. In terms of what led me to weight loss, I mean, the desire to feel better about myself, to feel better, because when you're overweight, you don't feel good, man. You don't feel good. You don't like what you're seeing in the mirror. Your body's not functioning optimally. And I've had bouts with this up and down, and that would be interesting to look at why I've had bouts of it up and down through the lens of what you just talked about. It's an interesting discussion. How I did it was mostly ketogenic dieting. I've experimented with a lot of different diets over time. I even did 2 full years of being vegan, 2 separate years. One when I was in the Army, and then one later on. And that, the veganism never worked for me. And if it's working for somebody else, that's great. And now I'm doing a carnivore diet, which is quite the opposite. It's, no vegetables, no fruits, only meat, right? And I would have laughed if somebody had told me 10 years ago I'd be doing that. But there are good arguments. If you look into the work of like Dr. Anthony Chaffee, he makes an argument for us being obligatory carnivores, right? Who knows? I don't know if we have enough information to have all this diet dogma, but we can make observations about how things affect us. And so I've had layers of this, right? So I had, success getting my body in better shape But then I still had digestive issues that I was still struggling with from a young age. And that was what led me to carnivore. Ketogenic dieting was great, but I still had all kinds of, intestinal issues and things like that. So I had to keep searching. And I guess, primarily it's wanting to move away from pain and to move towards pleasure. And it's sort of a question of, well, you're going to pay now, you're going to pay later. If you pay now, if you pay the suffering now in terms of, the discipline of saying no to whatever that, food is that's ultimately going to make you sick, and saying, yes to, I'm going to make myself suffer a little bit in the gym for a while, so I don't have to pay that suffering later in a passive way that's thrust upon me. I'm choosing the way that I will harden myself, the suffering that I'll have. Also, another thing that was really transformative for me there was getting in the habit of always having a personal trainer. I just know about myself that I'll get lost in work. I'll get lost in other things. And if I don't get a trainer, I'm going to tend to start to, fall off that path. I'd like to be a little more David Goggins about that and just, be like,
right.
Yeah. He would be like, Mark, you ain't got it yet. Like I could hear his voice. I've listened to his audiobook so many times, man. It's such a fantastic book and such a fantastic story and fantastic guy, but he's right, and I need to flip that switch inside my head. But, there's something about knowing what your weaknesses are too. So we've got this thing inside Simpleology where we talk about Kankyo Kaizen, designing your environment. Kaizen is the slow, gradual improvements that make a big, lasting change. And then Kankyo is the Japanese word for environment. It's a Simpleology neologism, a word that we made up for making people aware, hey, if you have certain tendencies, craft your environment in a way that's going to move you in the direction that you want to be moved.
Yes.
And all of that, and there's probably more I could say too, but those are some of the foundational things. And also just being conscious that we live in an environment where people have been brainwashed to believe a lot of really wrong things. And when you're the healthy person, you're going to be attacked, man. You're going to be attacked. Like, you just have to accept there are going to be people around you. Why are you so obsessed with food? You have an unhealthy relationship with food, as someone sits there eating their fucking Twinkie and ho-ho, in front of the tube. And you're going to lecture me about the unhealthy. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the irony of, I loved everything you said, especially the environment, those turning points for you, moving into that environment, especially when it comes to health, success, or whatever, having that, the way I think of what you just talked about, like your coach, your personal trainer, for example, having the support system and even arranging more of your environment in ways that support whatever that goal is, that to me is alignment. And part of what I hear is that the team, like, for accountability, like, I don't know if I learned it from you or where, but that external and internal accountability, like, we've got our own internal accountability and make ourselves do things. But man, how amplified it is when we have the external accountability. And studies show that people who create that external accountability typically have a 95% chance of completing whatever that goal is versus if they don't do it, right? So it's like creating ways to do that, especially when those people holding you accountable are knowledgeable and can help shortcut the process. It's almost like, man, that makes so much sense. Last thing I'll respond to is the normalization of what's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Like, it's been so, from diet to the way sometimes we pursue our finances, to the way we cut off the access to this greater genius, to our education. So there's, not to poo-poo education system overall, but there's just so many things that have been normalized that are actually dysfunctional, even down to the, I hate to say it, but down to the even identity, how we identify from so many ways and create all these giant chasms of separation. And even just humanity itself is like, oh my God, come on, guys, let's get it back together, But, dude. But the normalization of that stuff, I feel like many of the things you mentioned, especially when it comes to having that coaching, accountability, and then that awareness, like you talked about, of that how you're feeling, when just taking that time to become aware, breathe and sense, how am I feeling, and really starting to connect the dots that, wow, why is it every time I eat this, I feel like this the next day? I think that's like a step in the direction that people start to take. I think COVID gave us a great opportunity for more people to start doing that, because so many people had to put the brakes on the chasing, in the typical distractions, to where they all of a sudden, a lot of people had to sit with themselves and become aware of what they were really experiencing, and some turning points. I feel like that was a great, what might have been meant for other means and had other impact, also helped so many people start to expand their awareness and ask and seek for more, and start having some of those turning points like you've had. So let's talk about your mission. Like, what are the things that are driving you now? Like, as I've watched you, I've seen you do the amazing things in tech. I've seen you teach and like dedicate, to me, some of the most profound lessons, to helping people improve their own lives and achieving their goals. You're freaking creating the Simple Knowledge platform, which is like, I breathe and live it every day.
Me too.
And it's so freaking epic. I don't know how people do get stuff done without it, to be honest.
I'm the same. I'd be
you kind of forget after using it, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, man, how did I ever live without this?
Yeah.
But to have done all of those things, just like what drives, like, what are you being driven by mission wise? Like, what's, can you articulate it, or is it something that you've just kind of stumbled on or been intuitively guided to here and there? What would you say?
It's a hard one to put down, but I mean, if I had to name it, I would just say, somehow I got to a point in my life where I'm able to see what's going on in technology, maybe a little better than the average guy, and can, predict certain things that are going on with that. And there's all sorts of trends that I think we need to be very conscious of. Stuff I've been writing about for decades now. A lot of it's coming true right before our very eyes. And the dangers of some of these things we're starting to observe as well. And Simpleology started out as a platform to solve a problem that I hadn't articulated this way yet, but it's something that I now teach as the complexity gap. And it's this idea that everything is exploding exponentially right now. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that not only is technology improving on an exponential growth curve, or I don't know, improving is a hard thing to say. Is it really improving things, right? It's getting more powerful on an exponential growth curve, and that power can be used for good or evil, right? And it is being used for good and evil. Simultaneously, we have an explosion in information, and not all of that information is good or useful. So the complexity gap is this gap between the amount of information available to us and the hardwired limitations of how much we can consciously manage. In 2000, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, famously observed that if you take all of the information in recorded history, there's a whole conversation as to have we seen the whole recorded history picture. I think maybe not, right? But if you take all that's recorded in, mainstream history, and you take all the information that was recorded from them from the very beginning of history, according to the mainstream view, up until the end of 2003, it would be about 5 exabytes of data. And then in 2004, by the end of 2004, we were entering, about 5 exabytes of data into the stream every 2 or 3 days. And you can plot that out on an exponential growth curve. And that was 2004, right? And if we'd been adding 2 to 3 or at 5 exabytes every 2 to 3 days, that would be a linear growth curve, right? Okay, which would still be pretty staggering. But it's been going exponentially. So the rate at which we are adding information to the stream is increasing as well. So I don't know how much information we're entering into the stream every hour now. It's probably some number that I don't even know if there's a word for it, right? So, this is a problem because we don't know how much of that information is useful. A lot of that information is being curated for us by algorithms for the desires of people who don't necessarily have your interests in mind. So this complexity gap, the gap between how much we can handle and how much is there in terms of information, is that is probably the primary problem I'm focused on solving right now. I think there's other, parts that's a part of a much larger conversation, what I call the great conflict of the future, which is fast moving technology versus slow moving governance, right? It's our inability to be able to reel in what we are creating. We are creating things that are growing beyond our capacity and wisdom to manage them. And that's another really, really serious problem. But I focus on the information part of it, the complexity gap part of it, because we have a very powerful tool that we have been iterating, over the last 20 years to make people better equipped to handle that. So that's the primary thing that's driving me now. I know that the information front is kind of the first step of that battle, and it's the one that everybody's losing really bad, because what are we doing? We're picking up our devices and we're just allowing ourselves to be blasted with information when it should be a whole different relationship. And what Simpleology does is it says, what do you want? It's the simple science of getting what you want, right? So you figure out what you want. Now that's a whole deep philosophical question that we need to think very deeply about. But even if we don't know what we want to be when we grow up, and most of us don't, and even I don't, I'm 56, I still know there are certain things that I need to focus on. I need to focus on my health. I need to focus on financial fitness. I need to focus on, I talk about even beyond financial fitness, skills, knowledge, and health are the things that you really need to start with as a foundation. Then I tell people to have a lifeboat business that they can manage outside of big tech, have independence from big tech, if you can manage that. And those are things that, regardless of what you think is important philosophically or what might be good for you later on down the road, we can at least say, hey, you know what? I haven't figured this other stuff out down the road, but I do need to improve my knowledge. I do need to improve my skills. I do need to improve my health. I do probably need to build a lifeboat business. You get whatever that is in mind that you think is important, that you can know unequivocally is important, and say, okay, I can start moving toward that, because, when you start moving toward something, it creates stability. The great Maxwell Maltz had a wonderful metaphor about this. He said, try balancing a bike standing still. It's very hard. But as soon as that bike starts moving forward, it's very easy to be balanced. So in Simpleology, we say, okay, pick something, right? Again, you don't have to know what the great big thing is, but pick something. Maybe it's fitness. For a lot of people, it's going to be fitness. Pick that and start moving toward it. You plug it into the system, and it's going to guide you instead of being bombarded by the infinite stream of probably irrelevant information, mostly irrelevant information that this thing is going to hit you with. You say, okay, now I'm going to figure out, what do I need to do? What do I need to focus on so that I can make that happen? Because if you don't focus your energy on that, what tends to happen is that blasting of random information is now going to send you off in an unpredictable direction, because your actions are being chosen by some external force. So it takes that, we're talking about internal, external accountability. There's also internal and external decisions. If you don't make an internal decision and keep focusing on that decision over and over and over again, something external is going to make that decision for you.
That's so good. Yeah, that's so good. So you're go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I was just wrapping it up. That's what keeps me moving forward now.
Yeah, your newest iteration of I think Simpleology 15, done using the wonderful list, the projects. There's just so much in there. I don't want to overwhelm people. Just to give the practical benefits of, I'll say it, I'll save you from having to, the practical benefits of using Simpleology, using the simple tool to help focus, to help eliminate the distractions, to help clarify what really needs to be done and begin to prioritize, to begin to create leverage through delegation, begin to schedule the things, that having them clearly in your focus so you're not missing stuff, and having an easy way where you're not like losing to-do lists and sprint and all this crap and all these discorded things. And even just, there are so many things about this platform that have truly simplified getting stuff done and getting what you want. From my own personal, well, I'm using the new relationship thing you rolled out with my wife now. We're trying that. Now you kind of need somebody to be consistent with you in order for that to work. So you got to have those conversations of, look, I'm going to be doing this. I need you to do it with me daily too. Otherwise, it's not going to be very effective.
That's right.
But I'm loving that new tool, man. And it's already been insightful, like to see the things my wife might not have normally told me otherwise.
Yes.
Had we not been using this tool, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that really bugs her. You know? So I'm loving it, man. So for I'm going to put the link for people to see. Also, you mentioned the lifeboat. That's part of the Solomon's Ark. Training you do, right? And that has been awesome as well. I love, so when you mentioned the lifeboat, I can't say I've successfully done that yet. Something independent of the technology. Want to get there though. Yeah. But yes, that totally makes sense. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm loving everything you're saying, man. I mean, I love that you're doing the relationship saver and all that too. Like, you're one thing I think people really need to observe about you is that one of the reasons why you have been able to accomplish so much and it becomes just such an extraordinary human being, you know, is that you are a good, diligent student, you know, like you don't mess around with things. Like you take something on board and you're like, okay, I'm going to actually do it. So many of us are just like, okay, we think we might do that. You're like, oh, okay, that looks good. You just roll up the sleeves and you just go.
Yeah,
you know,
and get it done.
Yeah, and we need to do more of that, you know, because you know we can think and imagine about things all day long, and I will learn 10 times, maybe 100 times, maybe 1,000 times more from doing something than I will from reading a whole stack of books. You know. Yeah.
And the other thing, you seem to have found a way to create something that is universally well, I can't say, maybe there's personalities and personality types that it won't work for. Simpleology, I don't know. I just can't say I haven't met them. I do think there's only one class that I know it universally won't work for, and that's people not willing to commit to their own growth. Like, if you're not willing to commit to that, then you're probably not going to work for you.
I don't know what's going to work for somebody unwilling to commit to their own growth, you know?
Bingo.
It's like,
good luck.
Right? If you're unwilling to commit to your own growth, it's like, okay, you have basically served yourself up, you know, on a silver platter to whoever wants to, you know, dine on your energy, you know? Yeah. And there are a lot of things out there that will, you know?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So true, man. Well, thank you, brother, for just your continued work. How instrumental you've been in so many people's lives. But personally, for me, I gotta say, man, you're one of those turning points for me that I can look back at and say, man, not to mention that I went on later to learn about integration marketing, and that helps with my own company, another thing that you teach. But integration marketing is why I learned about you. And beautifully, it was just so, it's like, when the student is ready, that old cliche, the teacher appears. I was so ready, bro, for something to help me get a grip on and put some structure and help me kind of put a process in place to get stuff done and effectively and efficiently. You know, it's like I was so ready, and it just was like, ta-da. I don't know if there's anything else in the world existing like that, but if there is, great. Hopefully people will use it and find it, but I got this one.
Yeah.
So Simpleology, man, thank you for just that work. I know millions of people using it or what have you, but just personally from me, I just say thank you so much, brother. It's been such I just can't even put into words how much of a benefit. I don't know if you can feel the genuineness and sincerity of that. I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, I mean that you have helped me take care of my family You know what I'm saying? You've helped me become the person that I wanted to be through that simple offering and the lessons I've learned from you. So just really appreciate it, man. Really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I know you don't say things, that are not genuine. That's one of the many things I admire about you. And, this is what keeps me going, right? When you hear back from people that what you're doing is having a positive impact, the Japanese have this idea of ikigai. It's like, what do you love doing? What are you good at? What can you make money at? But also, what is going to be useful to the world?
Yes.
And if you get those things in alignment, it really helps you. Speaking of alignment, to maybe put a cherry on top of this, if you get those things in alignment, it's very powerful. And that one last little bit of like what is useful to the world is really important, because if you're doing something that's not useful to the world, you're going to be out of alignment with the world. And man, there's a wonderful feeling that you get when you get all those things lined up. And Simpleology is designed to help create all of that alignment and keep you moving in that alignment too. So yeah, man, great to.
Well, thank you, brother. Last, to just give some people direction. Besides, I'll put the Simpleology. In fact, I'm just to let everybody know, I'm going to use my affiliate code link.
Right on, please do.
I'm an affiliate. I'm going to send you to both Simpleology, send you to Solomon's Arc. Is there any other links I should make sure to send people to?
Those are good. We're making some big changes and all that too, by the way. I can't wait to show you some of the new stuff we're working on.
Beautiful.
But those are two great entry points. And the Solomon's Arc is for somebody who wants guidance building their business, but anybody who wants to just figure out how to get the things that they want and get unstuck in their life. Then the Simpleology, the first bit, is the key. That's the foundation.
Perfect, man. Well, brother, thank you again. I look forward to doing this again. I think I told you I've got this new coaching program. You've already helped my students. Some of them have already jumped on and been blessed by Simpleology.
That's awesome.
But also the 5-day challenge I'll be rolling out. I'll tell you a little bit about that.
Awesome.
I've been working on it for a while. I'd love to have you share some of your genius there as well.
More than happy to, man.
Thank you so much, man. Everybody, Mr. Mark Joyner is one of those people that if you're not already following, which I know a lot of you are, the rest of you get on board, learn from him. He will help you really get a grasp, especially Simpleology, on what you're doing and give you the tools to help accomplish your dreams, really fulfill your dreams. So thank you, Mark. And I will see the rest of you on the next episode of the Alignment Podcast. Peace.
Boom. See everybody.